everyone else's. Thank you so much for coming. Huge welcome. I am so excited to be here because it's my first in-person panel event in 2 years. So I was saying to a few folk today that I'm slightly nervous because I've forgotten what it's like not to look into a Zoom screen, but also really excited because I think the buzz and the energy you get from a real life audience is fantastic. And I've been waiting for this moment. So I'm very, very excited to be here and to be joined by some amazing folk who are doing work across academia, across working in communities. And it's just really brilliant to be here joined by people who are doing amazing stuff. I'm Teresa Narayanan. I am an architect, urban designer. And over the last decade or so, my work is focused on sustainable transport and climate action. In my day job, I work for the City of Edinburgh Council, but I've been involved with the Scotland's Climate Assembly and the Climate Commission and many, many other things. Hugely privileged to be part of collaborative work with across the board. Today, I'm really delighted because we're going to be exploring how we have more meaningful conversations, especially as we come out of COVID. Digital tools, online tools are so important in terms of how we have that conversation with people, with citizens, with organizations across the board, to have that collaborative cross-sector approach to making change that we all know needs to happen now, happen quicker. And we need to make sure that people are involved in shaping those conversations. So we need to make sure that tools that we use in having those conversations are meaningful to those who are working on the ground. So it'll be really interesting, I think, and quite thought-provoking today to jump in and have a discussion around that. Couldn't be a more appropriate time, I think, to discuss this issue because, as we host COP26, we need to focus the need to accelerate that transformation, local, national, and global transformation to make our cities and towns more resilient, more sustainable, lower carbon, more livable. And we need to make sure that we are guided by evidence and data. And we layer the personal stories alongside the evidence and data that obviously we will be listening to today. We need to make sure that the impact of what we do is captured, and hopefully tools like this will help do that as well. But before I jump into the session and introduce the panel, some quick housekeeping. We have a virtual audience as well. I think there's a camera there. So a big hi to everyone who's watching us. There's no fire alarm scheduled. There's toilet facilities located on level 1, room RT208. Hopefully those here have already found that. And there's standard facilities located on level 1, rooms RT202 and 203. Event is being live streamed and it's recorded. Face coverings must be worn, so please make sure that we're all safe. As a panel, we've been told we're okay to take the face coverings off, but again, it's totally up to you how comfortable you feel doing so. We're running an online Q&A event, and the platform is called Revox. If you look around the room, you'll see little green signs that show you how to sign into that Revox. Because it's a hybrid event, we want to make sure that everyone's included and feels like they're part of this and that they're here in the room as well. To join the Q&A, please go to revox.app. Again, it's there around. There's a number. Please enter the number. And I've tried it myself, and it's easy enough to get in and ask your questions. So please answer the poll questions. Make sure that you join in, ask questions. I'll be picking those questions up to ask the panel as well. I have a note to say, please keep the questions collegiate, polite, but looking around at this room, I cannot see that it will be anything but. So thank you. I'll ask the panel questions just before 12 o'clock. We also have a question for you, for those who are watching in the audience, for all of us in the room here. The question is, what, if anything, will you do differently because of this event in your professional capacity or personally? So please, while you're listening and you're thinking about what's being discussed, please have a think about that question as well. It's really good for us to understand, what kind of change can happen because of this. Right, so I hope you're all comfortable, ready for an hour or so of thoughtful, thought-provoking discussion with our brilliant panel, who I'm going to introduce right now. Malcolm is a research fellow in transport and spatial analysis at the Institute for Transport Studies at the University of Leeds. We have Payne, climate resilience manager at Sniffer, Teresa Glasgow, natural environment officer at Glasgow City Council, Lucy Gillie, General Manager of South Seeds, which is a community organisation based in Glasgow, and Andy Boyle, a member of Leeds Climate Commission and a Director of Otley 2030. So please, can you give us a warm welcome to the panel? It's nice to hear like applause because 2 years of Zoom. Anyway, right. So let's get started. It's my pleasure to welcome Malcolm first, who's going to talk through the tool.
Thank you. Right. Let's get the tech working. Sorry. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see that. So yes, thank you. I'm Malcolm Morgan. I'm a research fellow at the University of Leeds. And today what I'm going to show you off is the place-based carbon calculator, which I was the lead developer of. So as you can see, it's a big map. In what it's showing is the average carbon footprint per person for every neighbourhood in England. And apologies that it's not in Scotland yet, but we're hoping to bring it to the rest of the UK soon. But for practical reasons, we started with England. So it's an interactive map, and I'll, I'm sure you're used to sort of Google Maps and all that kind of things. These little neighbourhoods are lower super output areas. If you've not come across those before, they're statistical neighbourhoods created for the census, and they're designed to have an average population between about 1,500 and 3,000 people. So they're supposed to be roughly the same number of people in each one. So because I can't show you for Glasgow, I'm going to show you for Leeds, because that's my hometown. So we'll zoom into Leeds and just give it a moment to load. And there you go. So the way we're scoring these carbon footprints is we're comparing them to the England average. So areas that do better than the England average have the grades A to C, and they're in the blue. And then the places that are worse than the England average have the grades D to F, and they're in the red. So you can already see there's a lot of variation from place to place. And this is for the total carbon footprint, but the map also allows you to see other things. So let's say we just wanted to see the emissions from cars. And you can see that the pattern immediately changes. And this is quite typical that we see people in city centres don't drive as much. People out in rural areas tend to drive a bit more, or we might want to look at, say, gas emissions, so thinking more about heatings and buildings, and then you see a slightly different pattern. And there's also other sort of useful kind of context information. So, for example, if you want to see what the average size of homes are, perhaps you're thinking of moving to Leeds and you want to know where the big houses are, you can see exactly where they are. And of course, the size of homes has a big effect on the energy consumption. So this is directly relevant for carbon emissions. So if I pop it back to the total emissions. Now for, the map's kind of nice, interesting to see some patterns, but there's a lot more data that we can help people drill into. So if you click on any of these neighbourhoods, you get this little pop-up report come up, which gives you a more detailed breakdown. So on the table on the right-hand side, each different part of the carbon footprint is given a grade. So you can see overall this is a B- area, so a bit better than average. But there's a mix, some kind of parts of the carbon footprint, this area is doing better than others. So in terms of what this local community might do, they can focus on the highest carbon bits rather than focusing on the low carbon bits where there's less progress to be made. The graph on the other side shows the comparison as a graph and comparing it to, so the first column is the LSOA that you clicked on. The second one is the local authority average, so this is sort of Leeds. The third column is the England average, so that's the sort of national picture. And then the fourth column is for similar areas in other parts of the country. So this is based on the Office for National Statistics area classification. And we take the average of similar areas. So you can compare yourself to sort of similar people in similar circumstances, but all across the country. So I said that this area is doing a bit better than average, so you think the people here might be quite happy, except when you look at the horizontal black line, that's where we need to get to by about 2032 for the 6th carbon budget. So you can see even this area that's doing better than average still has a long way to go. And just for comparison, if we pick a high carbon area out on the edge of Leeds, You can see that's the same black line, see how low it's gone. Within this tool, we found that the variation between the lowest and highest carbon neighbourhoods is about a factor of 8. You think someone in a high carbon neighbourhood going around with a carbon footprint of 8 people gives you an idea of how much variation there is from place to place and how far some people have to go in a very, very short time. But even in this high carbon neighbourhood, you see they do better and worse at different parts of the carbon footprint. So even here, there's a sense of prioritisation. And then across the top here, we've got a whole bunch of tabs that show you different information. So for example, if you want to know more about housings, we've got historical gas and electricity consumption, again here compared to the red bar is the local area, and then the blue bar is the local authority, and the green bar is the England average. So you can see there are big differences there in gas consumption, similarly in electricity emissions, and then lots of information about like types of building age. I won't go through all of these because there's lots of graphs, but there's data from the energy performance certificates. If you've got an energy performance certificate for your house, the data's in here showing sort of the breakdown of the different parts of the house, how well insulated they are, and similarly information for transport in terms of, say, car emissions, van emissions, how people travel to work. And see, this is a very car-dominated neighbourhood, which is why they have high car emissions. And then also, say, we've got a general tab which has a bit of information about sort of the population and the sort of social demographic characteristics, so you can get a flavour for what are the people who live in this area. So as well as the carbon footprint maps, we've also added in some other maps that provide useful context information. So the first of these I'm going to show you is the public transport stops layer. So this covers all public transport stops in Great Britain. So this layer does cover Scotland. And we've used the same blue to red colour coding scheme, but to colour the frequency of service. So we know it's not good enough just to be near a bus stop. You need a reliable bus service if you're going to ditch the car and switch to a low carbon form of transport. And so Leeds is actually a really nice example of this. So you can see that there are some routes sort of in and out of the centre, which are in the dark blue. That indicates a really good high frequency service. But you don't actually have to go particularly far from the centre of Leeds to start seeing those yellow and orange and even some red dots, which means a really infrequent, poor quality service. So the idea is these kinds of maps help communities start to think about, well, what are we going to do in terms of public transport? And to show you that a little bit further, we have another layer which we call the 15-minute neighbourhoods layer. So you might have heard of 15-minute neighbourhoods. The idea of the 15-minute neighbourhood is that in a sustainable town or city, everything that you would need on a day-to-day basis is in a 15-minute walk. Paris have pioneered this idea of the 15-minute neighbourhood, the 15-minute walk, but different cities are using different targets. So, for example, Melbourne in Australia is using 20 minutes by public transport. Now, those may sound very similar, but they're actually wildly different targets. So this layer, we wanted to help people visualise how travel time varies by mode and location. So here's an example where the green area is 15 minutes by walk, the blue area is 15 minutes by bicycle, the purple area is 15 minutes by walking and public transport, and the red area is 15 minutes by bike and public transport. And you can see the different modes obviously have very different travel distributions and ranges, but also it's quite interesting, you can see on the public transport in sort of one axis, it's working quite well. You can go quite a long way in 15 minutes. But in the sort of perpendicular axis, the public transport network clearly isn't working well in that direction because you can't go further than you could cycle in 15 minutes. And you know, each of these dots is for one of the LSOAs, and you can click on any one and get your own local travel time isochrones. And just to show you how much this varies, if we pick, say, somewhere still in Leeds, you know, completely different shape and pattern. You know, here the public transport really isn't making any difference at all. So there's a huge amount of variation neighbourhood to neighbourhood. So I will, other things I'll just show you. So as well as this being a free tool, so I should have said this at the beginning, it's a free website, www.carbon.place. So you can log on, access it, use it as much as you like. But we also make all the data free to download. So if you click on the data link at the top, there's information about how to use the data, where to download it, and also all the data sources and things. So you can get more out of this. And our hope is that local authorities and communities will use the tool, but also will engage with the data and think about how it's produced and how it could be improved. We also show summaries for local authorities. So if you're a local authority in England and you just want the big picture, you can pick your local authority from the drop-down list and you get the same kind of overall information. So I will go back to the main page as a very quick overview of all the things in the carbon calculator. There's a lot more information. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Martin.
Shall I stop sharing this?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
it's just amazing for me to see how much, when you bring all the data together, the richness of place really comes through. There's a couple of questions coming in, and I'll hold on to those for a second, but just a quick one for me. Was there anything that surprised you or that struck you as something you didn't expect when you were building the tool?
I think, yeah, the biggest surprise was the extent of the variation. Like, we knew there would be some, but when I started out, I thought, oh, you know, maybe 3 or 4 times or something. But, you know, 8 is a really big difference, and hopefully that it will galvanise the people who live in those kind of neighbourhoods to, you know, realise what they're contributing to and change.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep the questions that are coming in. Please keep the questions coming in for those who are watching for the panel discussion. But the next up is to talk about place standard tool. Teresa.
Is that going to do it for me? Have I just done a classic mistake? Go to present again. Oh, sorry, I'm struggling. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. My name is Payne. I'm here from the environmental charity Sniffer. We are a sustainability charity based in Scotland, and we work with communities to build resilient, thriving places. We work very closely with the Scottish Government, and we help, for example, to deliver the Adaptation Scotland programme. I'm going to be talking to you today about the place standard with a climate lens. So the place standard is a tool that's been in existence for a good few years now, and it's really a qualitative tool that we can use to structure conversations with local stakeholders about place. It allows you to consider your place and break it down into various different kind of categories of what can be important about the place and what makes a place livable. And one of the issues that has been sort of raised in the last few years is that there is no explicit mention of climate change within the place standard. So what we're doing with the climate lens is we're working together as a partnership project with Scottish Government, Public Health Scotland, the Adaptation Scotland programme, the Sustainable Scotland Network, that's SSN, and Sniffer. We're working together with local authority partners from across Scotland to try to integrate climate change, both mitigation and adaptation, into this tool. One of the advantages of the place standard is that it can help us take a really complex global issue and take it to our local place so that we can understand what the issues are, but also potentially what we can do locally to help address this problem. The place standard is great because it identifies what's working about a place, but it also shows us what needs to be improved, and it gives local people a chance to put their views about what they would like to see in their place forward. It also helps us to remove silo thinking. You can end up with getting a lot of different groups of people in the room together, and that allows us really to take a holistic view and a collaborative kind of approach to placemaking. So why are we adding the climate change lens to the place standard? Well, there's three main reasons really. It will help our places to prepare for the future. We know, for example, that placemaking is quite a slow and incremental process, but actually climate impacts and the race for net zero need to happen very fast. And the place standard tool can help us to kind of mesh these two contradictions. We also know that we won't achieve net zero or resilience without changing our places. It's impossible to plan for the future without thinking about the climate. This tool will also help local people to share their knowledge. I think locally, many of us struggle to envisage an alternative future for our places, but it's a really good way of bringing everyone up to speed with what climate change could mean locally. And it will also help to provide local insight, and it's local insight that often make or breaks climate solutions. We know that climate change action imposed from the top down just isn't achieving the results that we need fast enough. One of the key lessons that we are getting from the pilots so far is that it's facts and figures are really, really helpful, but it's local narratives that really resonate. So if we have the right people around the table and we are telling the right story and inspiring, perhaps by drawing reference to the correct co-benefits or issues that matter locally, that's the way that we're really going to get people to take action. Using this tool also really helps with being fair and inclusive. We know that climate change is a stress multiplier that will exacerbate the existing inequalities. What Malcolm was just saying about the discrepancy in emissions between the richest and the poorest neighbourhoods, that's really quite shocking. I wasn't expecting it to be so large. The place standard tool allows a degree of procedural justice and opportunities for communities to have their say. So the intentions for the tool is so that communities can envisage what their places could look like in a climate ready and climate just future, and to share their knowledge. For organisations like local authorities to be confident that they're addressing key climate change issues and to join the dots across different policy areas. And it's a way really for communities and organisations to work in partnership. That really is key. We know that climate change is too big a problem for it to be solved by the council. Everyone needs to work together, and the place standard is a great tool for that. So what does the climate lens look like? Well, at the minute, it's not very pretty. This is the version 1 of the pilot that we're testing. It's a series of kind of prompt questions. So for each of the 14 segments of the existing place standard, there's additional questions to ask the people in the room to get them to think about, well, public transport, how do we decarbonise that? How resilient is that to extreme weather and climate impacts? So we're trying to add climate change dimension to all of the segments of the place standard. We didn't want to have a separate climate change segment because that implies that climate change is a discrete feature, whereas actually we know that it's going to impact on all aspects of our place. This is where we're piloting the projects at the moment. These pilots are just about concluding, but we've been working with Aberdeenshire Council in Strathclyde, Fife Council in Buckhaven, Edinburgh Council looking across the city. They've got a thriving green spaces policy that so look at a citywide approach. And then we've been working with Teresa in Glasgow City Council, looking at placemaking in the Greater Pollock area. So trying to look at a range of different partner project types and different sort of socio-economic and geographic settings. How's the pilot going so far? Well, really what we're seeing is that people are very keen to include climate change in all placemaking sessions. They can't see a use for thinking about long to medium term future of our places where we're not thinking about net zero and we're not thinking about resilience. Generally, we're seeing real enthusiasm to act on climate change from across the demographic spectrum. Perhaps I think the biggest barrier to action that people have had has been that this massive kind of impenetrable global problem, what can we do locally about it? And by breaking it down into a place-based issue and place-based solutions, that really helps people feel that they have agency and power. It's a great way of translating academic ideas into quite locally owned action. And actually almost rather than having a place standard conversation with a climate lens, it's almost the other way around. We are looking at climate change with a place standard lens, and it's helping to make the issue more relatable for people. What needs more refining? Well, it's a pretty lengthy tool. To undertake a place standard session, really, you're looking at half a day. And once you're adding in issues like climate change and looking at different timeframes, it's quite a complex job for facilitators. So we're still needing to think about the materials that we're using to support people and training that might be needed. The material is going to be more visual and perhaps more facilitation tools. People are still struggling to separate out resilience and net zero. And perhaps the biggest learning is that it's very difficult to hold place standard sessions in a pandemic. We've had outdoor sessions, indoor sessions, virtual sessions. It's difficult. And perhaps I think the key lesson for me is that you can't just hold a place standard session and move on. It's got to be part of the journey. People give their opinions, their time, their energy, and they want to see that they're part of a process, part of a solution. If you would like to get to find out more, these are my contact details. We really would be delighted to hear from anyone's views. You can find out a bit more about the pilot and also the Place Standard website there, which is where the original tool sits. The tool we are going to pilot with another 5 or 6 places between now and January, and then we're hoping to have the finalised version up on the Our Place website by the end of March 2022. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. It's brilliant. I've used the Place Standard tool in my work as well, and it's really great to see it being updated. I love the fact you say it's not a separate strand, it's making climate action to a place standard, which is brilliant. So yeah, I think you're going to know what's going to happen in Glasgow.
Hi everyone, my name is Teresa Glasgow. I'm a Natural Environment Officer for Glasgow City Council Parks Department. I focus on community engagement for Glasgow Parks and Green Spaces, and we use the climate lens through our wee wonders in Greater Pollock. So a wee bit of background about my job. I focus on community engagement in parks and green spaces throughout Glasgow. For the past 3 years, one of my focuses has been on democratic innovation. I support the development of the overall Glasgow Parks Forum, which is made up of Friends of Parks groups from throughout the city. So part of my job is also to support the creation and development of those Friends of groups as well. We just finished the facilitation of the Glasgow Parks and Green Space Open Space Participatory Budgeting Panel, which is easy for me to say. It was a pioneering project supported by COSLA, which was a pilot for mainstreaming public funds into parks and green space, and there's a report coming out in 2022 from the Glasgow Population of Health about that to find out more information. A small part of my role as well has been a place standard champion for Glasgow City Council, so I've used it a lot in previous employment within the job I have now, and I encourage other people to use it and can help out with sessions. So we use the climate lens within Greater Pollock. So before I worked in this job, I lived and worked in Pollock, and one of my focuses was to create a green network, and that had the purpose of gathering green space groups together, local authority officers together, community residents together, simply to share what work you were doing or what you were interested in. And that way we were creating an atmosphere of support and then collaboration projects. So through the pandemic, we managed to, this time last year, create an online space for those groups and people to come together. Being digital, it wasn't fully accessible for everyone, so we didn't manage to reach everybody. We still haven't managed to reach everybody, but we started to work more together online and just sharing where we are with our green space work. And there I bumped into Sonia Milne and Claire Wilson, who can't be here today. They work for Sustainable Glasgow in Glasgow City Council, and their work at the moment consists of delivering and developing the Climate Emergency Implementation Plan and delivering climate conversations throughout Glasgow. So through the online green space and development work, okay, no problem. Yeah, so we met online, and with the community groups online, we decided that once restrictions were easing, we were going to meet in the outdoor spaces that we were talking about. So we're going to do walkabouts within green spaces throughout Greater Pollock. Sonia was in contact with Kat from Sniffer, and it was the pilot came up and we decided, well, what a great way, what a great tool to use while we're going to be out and about anyway. So the wee wonders were created anyway. I put a couple of slides in here just to describe the background of some of Sonia and Claire's work. It's underpinned by the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework for action. The work that they do is very practical, so they learn while they're doing, and they've got milestones and indicators as well. Put a slide in here just to show the kind of many Glasgow City Council strategies that underpin all of our work. And if you're interested, my favourite one there is our Dear Green Place that drives forward the parks development work in Glasgow. So if you were to Google that, it gives you a good flavour of what our approach is in Glasgow in regards to our parks and green space. So the climate conversations with the climate lens was contributing to Sonia and Claire's work, our work as well, and contributed to a communication strategy for the climate change sustainable Glasgow work, and also contributed to the curriculum of excellence work that's been developed with education in Glasgow. So down to the nitty gritty, we decided to concentrate on Househill Park, Crookston Woods and Damshot Woodlands and Greater Pollock. Again, this was decided by the community groups. And again, to reiterate, we didn't reach everybody that we wanted to, but we decided these are the places that we're going to go. So how we used the tool, so when I got all the information through, with the climate lens information. So there was a lot of studying for me, a lot of pulling people together who wanted to deliver this with us. It was in collaboration. So we had different people doing different things as we were walking through our wee wanders, and we all helped each other out immensely. So delivering it was myself from the local authority, 5 other departments from the local authority as well. We had community members help us out and deliver it and gather evidence. We had people who were dedicated to taking notes and taking photographs. Everybody had a job. So Damshot Woodlands, I'd encourage you to Google Damshot Woodlands and to have a look at the heritage and history behind this area in Greater Pollock. So to deliver the climate lens, we decided to work in direct collaboration with the local artists and residents, and some local young people who'd actually created lots of artwork in that space. So we started off each wee wander in each of the spaces with storytelling to ask people, how do you feel about this space? What's your connection with it? And that included the council workers as well. And then eventually we got round to using the place standard questions. So in Damshot Woodlands, just to highlight, we covered most of the themes around the place standard, but to highlight, they had a particular in-depth discussion about the subject moving around, and they marked that a number 5. And they reflected on the impacts of extreme weather as a result of climate change, and remarked on the treacherous conditions of entering the woodlands and accessibility, how that's reduced by heavy rain, but also by extreme temperatures that go down that are cold. They said that actually created more opportunity for them to go in to use the woodlands with their families because the ground was frozen. But there was also excellent shelter from trees in the warmer climates that they had been experiencing through the summer. In Househill Park, we had a really good discussion about traffic and parking. They marked that really low, between a 1 and a 2, and they remarked that there wasn't any bike parking facilities in their park, but within the vicinity of the area there was opportunities to hire a bike. The park's also surrounded by a quite condensed residential area and roads and a shopping centre, so they remarked on the overspill of the car park and how the air quality was affected and accessibility and moving around into the park was affected by that as well. Crookston Woods, just to finalise this, we had a great discussion around housing and community. The group discussed opportunities for supporting climate change mitigation, including renewable energy, opportunities in generation, perhaps generating power from the nearby river. We commented on the residential area and a new housing development that was just adjacent to the woods as well, and the fact that there was lots of buildings in the area that could be used for solar power panels, potential connection to waste energies facilities. So in conclusion, we've gathered all the information and the data from each exercise. All that information is given to kind of local development plans, the Friends of Group plans. We're hoping to help encourage the development of a Friends of Crookston Woods and a Friends of Damshot Woods. And I've communicated with Kat and the team at Public Health Scotland in relation to our opinion of the pilot so far. That's a really, really good tool to use, but it's essential to use it in collaboration with communities, with as many people as you can, to have a compassionate and assertive approach through working through the pandemic. And moving forward, we're hoping to have climate conversations. We'll be using some of the place standard climate lens questions online with the Glasgow Parks Forum and hopefully in person too. My contact details are up there as well as Sonia's, so thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. I love seeing how evidence-based tools translate into real life and what it means for people in the town. I think that was fantastic. So thank you so much. There's questions coming in. Thank you. I keep it for the panel, not just the time. I'm going to move on. I think that was a lovely kind of segue into actual work happening on the ground. So just to introduce Andy and Lucy, we'll have a quick conversation about what you've seen and your thoughts on that. But Andy, if you want to go first, maybe a little bit about what you do, and then I'll pass it to Lucy and we can have a conversation.
Yeah, so I'm from Otley, which is a beautiful rural town just off the edge of Malcolm's map, which is interesting, based in Leeds. But a lot of our work is really about how does our community connect with what's going on in the city, and connect what's going on in the region, and connect with what's going on nationally. And that's really the key theme. So Otley 2030, I'm involved in two organisations. Otley 2030 is a community group which is leading a climate and sustainability plan for the town, and deliberately a sustainability plan for the town, thinking about that, the place standard tool. Not the energy, and it was inspired by work. We've got a progressive town council, second in Yorkshire to declare a climate emergency. And so it's inspired by that work. And Otley Energy is really the commercial arm, if you like, of our community group. So it's a community benefit society owned by the community, and really looking at this vision of how a community can actually really participate and take ownership of the local energy systems that we need. So Otley 2030 does everything, again, thinking about that place standard approach, everything from delivering veg boxes to struggling families. We ran a really successful festival of kindness, of all sorts of really creative and participatory stuff. And Otley Energy has been, as well as putting some solar panels on local schools and local libraries, working with Leeds City Council. We've really been focusing, a lot of our time has been looking at that relationship that I'm talking about, that relationship between our community and what the City Council and the region needs to be doing to unlock all of the barriers that we know exist to meaningful change. So a big focus of our work with Otley Energy over the last couple of years has been looking at and working with West Yorkshire Combined Authority, Leeds Climate Commission, Leeds City Council and UK Green Buildings Council, looking at what we need in terms of a regional retrofit strategy. So if we're going to retrofit 27 million homes in the UK, what does that mean in terms of the roles of government, the roles of the region, but really importantly, the roles of the community in that. So there's three key overlapping projects, as well as all the practical stuff that we're getting on with. Three really important. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
It's all right, no problem. So three really important overlapping projects which really allude to the importance of things like data. So we have our Connecting a Community project, which is really looking at bringing the community and all of those different stakeholders together to co-design what our future looks like as a town, but what we hope our future looks like as a world. Our Otley donut, which is really working with the University of Leeds, looking at that donut economics model, about how does, a bit like Amsterdam have done, how does a community like Otley live within the boundaries of the earth. And then the net zero neighbourhood-based approach, which is the practical extension of this idea of retrofitting our communities. What Leeds have had success doing is actually going into communities to talk about regeneration, to talk about better communities, better neighbourhoods, and actually bringing the idea of better homes along as part of that idea. So we're extending that with this work with the UK Green Buildings Council into that broader idea of, well, actually, how do we tackle the whole thing? How do we really think about better neighbourhoods, better communities? How are we going to get around better, create 15-minute neighbourhoods, etc. And I'd just say finally, really, that behaviour change is at the heart of everything that we're doing. So really early days, we had some really inspirational training about motivational interviewing and how you can't come and preach to people, you can't come and tell people what to do. You've really got to understand their lives, understand what's important to them. And so through the work of Otley Energy, we're working with the COM-B model, which is from University College of London. And it's that, what are the capabilities, what are the opportunities, what are the motivations that everyone needs, that Boris Johnson needs to make his decisions, that our mayor needs, that local officers in local government, but right down into the community, what's that capacity building that we need? And tools like these, I think, provide that really solid foundation. And I really agree and pick up on that sense that the mixture of the data and the storytelling is so powerful if we can bring those two things together.
Brilliant, thank you, Andy. Just to check, Shona, can the audience see Lucy if she's sat there? Or... Thank you. This hybrid event, so just making sure that everyone feels included in this. Thank you. Please.
Hi, my name's Lucy Gillie and I work at South Seas. We are a community-led organisation. We're in the south central area of Glasgow. You're in Glasgow at the moment, and you might know that that is Govan Hill, Pollock Shields, Mount Florida, that area around Victoria Road. We've actually got a unit on Victoria Road, so people come to us. We've got really, really high engagement. Victoria Road's a very, very busy road. And the area covers about 35,000 people. So if you think of Stirling is 45,000 people, Otley is 25,000 people, you know, we are dealing with a substantial area. It's a 20-minute walk for 35,000 people. And we enable people to live a more sustainable life. So we have lots and lots of options that people, that sort of low carbon opportunities that people can access. And we don't really talk that much about climate change, and we do. If you talk to us about climate change, we will, but we don't force it on anyone. We're talking about these low carbon options, and they are a tool library. We also have a save energy in the home service. We've got energy officers. Energy officers in the office at the moment will be dealing with clients who come in for appointments to save energy in their home. And then we also have community gardens, and we've got a particular community garden project where you can adopt a raised bed for a growing season, and you learn how to grow salads and kitchen herbs, etc. And then we run short life projects. We've done a project on air pollution. Young people cycled around with air pollution monitors. We publish the data. But the thing that has really struck me is that the area that I work in, the area that I'm concerned about, is very mixed. We've got a number of data zones in the bottom 5% of the Scottish Index of multiple deprivation. But we've also got millionaires in the area. We've also got, there's affluent people in the area. And it's really interesting to know about this carbon tool, because I am providing these opportunities for people to live more sustainable lives. But I'm so aware that it's the people on a low income who are using the least carbon anyway, you know. There are people who are heating their home. They're spending a lot of money on heat, but the home has got 7 people in a 1-bedroom flat or 2-bedroom flat. You know, that's actually a really efficient way to the energy per person. So these tools are really, really interesting to me, and I would like to know more about them.
Brilliant, thank you. Just picking up on your point there, Lucy, about wanting to know more about the tools, just from what you've seen so far, it'd be good to understand from yourself and how, you know, do you see any barriers to people using this when, you know, in the work that you do? What is it that you think will jump out from what you've seen, both police standard and the carbon tool?
I don't think at this stage people on the ground would be using them. I think we would have to enable people to feed into them. But I think immediately, you know, on Victoria Road, there's a cycle lane has gone in the last 2 years, but it's actually a very, very busy road. And I think it would be really interesting to do some work that there's actually low car ownership in the area, because we have such fantastic transport connections, but we get all the pollution from the people who are travelling between the suburb and the city centre. And it would be fantastic to show that the cars don't belong in the area where the pollution is. So, I mean, that would be something I would like to use Malcolm's tool for immediately. And then, Catherine, your tool about the place standard is really important. I mean, we have used the place standard quite a lot in the south side already, but it's really interesting to have that climate focus on it, and perhaps we should redo it with the climate focus.
No, thank you. And Andy, you sir?
Yeah, I echo that. So thinking about the carbon calculator tool, I think my first look at it, and I zoomed in on Otley, and you instantly, because it's based on neighbourhoods, you instantly start to relate to them and understand them, and that disparity between the high levels of carbon emissions and the low, you really start to see them and understand them as communities. And I think it provides that really powerful conversation starter. And actually the fact that you can then drill down and understand what it is about those lives that make the difference and where we can impact. Again, relates to the inequality actually. And so what are we going to do about, if you think about retrofitting homes, what are we going to do about the carbon emissions, but actually what are we going to do about fuel poverty? And I think it makes that really direct link, and I think certainly the place standard really provides that design opportunity to really let people get creative about what it would be to live in better communities. And I think that the barrier question, I think for me, I agree with that point about people not engaging with it necessarily at a local level. I think all of these things need to be part of the process, need to be part of that process of connecting communities with the local authority, all the great work that Glasgow are doing. So how does it become part of the start of a conversation, the start of a design and actual implementation, that positive action that should come from it?
Absolutely, and picking up the point about the local authority having to pick this up and make it real, because you can have the conversations and you raise expectations of change happening. I think that's probably something that you've seen, and so something like this you think could make that direct link to action on the ground. And
I've got a question for Malcolm actually. Where I am where I'm working in Glasgow, it's pre-1919 sandstone tenements, and it's really hard to fit renewable generation onto these properties. But does your map, I know your map doesn't cover Scotland at the moment, but are you able to show where the heat pumps are and where all that renewable generation is?
Yes. So yeah, the heat pumps you can spot. They tend to not show up in the tool because there aren't that many of them. but the data is in there. So that all comes from the energy performance certificate. So if it's recorded on your energy performance certificate that you have a heat pump, then yes, it would show up.
Because I would like a tool that I could show Glasgow City Council that there is no renewable generation in our area. There's one step solar panelled, and it would be good to be able to reflect that back to Glasgow and then say, your planning, what's your planning department solution for this? Yeah, and I think that really that idea of net zero neighbourhoods that I was talking about earlier is really about that tool really demonstrates the differences in neighbourhoods, and actually housing types are a really good example of that. That you do have similarities. So if you can engage with one person about their home, you can then engage with others about their homes because of the similarities. And similarities are across people's lives, really.
Exactly, and there's a question that's come in. I suppose it's, we can pick this up. How do you address people's aspirations to have a better life? That might be more carbon intensive. So I think something like this, you've probably seen that in you.
Something that really struck me was that we tend to do placemaking exercises and place standard sessions in neighbourhoods that are perceived to need to be improved or neighbourhoods that are struggling. What Malcolm's data really kind of has shown is that actually these are probably the neighbourhoods that are contributing least to the global climate problem. We probably need to be having these place-making conversations with affluent neighbourhoods, breaking down the data, showing them that actually using a reusable coffee mug is not going to be enough. They are making sort of small green choices, but actually it's the affluent lifestyle that is a really significant impact to climate change. And actually, we probably need to be thinking about placemaking with neighbourhoods that are seen to be thriving as well, because actually with a climate lens, they're the ones that are having the problem, that are the problem to some degree.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And I think separating that idea of what is a good life, what we aspire to have good quality of life, from that just more, consume. And you know, there's a role for communities and society as a whole to say, actually, you know, we're not going to hold maximum consumption up as the best way to live.
Yeah, it connects that right back to the well-being economy and completely framing the conversation in a different way in terms of what your aspirations are. I'm keen to open this out to the floor. There's lots of questions coming in, which is fantastic, but it's nice to hear from the floor as well. Any questions for the panel?
I was going to ask if the you just talked about
Would that be all right if you want to come to the mic? Sorry. I should have thought about that, shouldn't I? I won't put anyone else on the spot.
It was I'm not going to focus on that. Instead, I wanted to just say something about data. I recently spoke to someone, a pal, who's at Ofgem, and he talked about the kind of data that's available. So Ofgem is supposed to collect data on heat pump installations and solar panels and these kind of interventions because it needs to have some sort of oversight of the grid and what's been generated and so on. But what he tells me is that it's kind of self-certified by the people that put them in, and they don't really need to put them in, so that in actual fact the data is garbage. But then you have the EPC, which I think was what you're using. But isn't there an issue with that? Because, you know, at least in Scotland, you get one when you're selling a house. How up to date is it? You've not sold your house for 30 years, you know. So there's a real sort of issue there. I mean, it seems to me that the best data that we would get would probably be something like what would be provided by Ofgem. But I think maybe there's a conversation that has to be had with Ofgem to make sure that, that there's a better process in place to actually get sort of piece of data.
No, thank you. Do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, data quality is the bane of my life. You're completely right. Certainly, there was a study done a few years ago that showed 80% of energy performance certificates contain at least one error. So yeah, it's not the best quality data. The thing is, we use that or we have nothing, and about half of homes now have an energy performance certificate, so you have some sort of idea roughly, but I would not hold up any of the work we've done as like the definitive, the final word on anything. But it's that point to start a conversation, and maybe, you know, once that conversation starts, you go, oh, actually Malcolm's data is rubbish, we know better. Great. go and act on what's actually happening, not on some obscure statistics.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that all of this transition has got sort of parallel tracks and necessary parallel tracks. That we've got sort of 10 years of meaningful change, and the Leeds Climate Commission did some work around the idea of readiness. So what technology is ready, what delivery is ready, are heat pumps ready, and how do we do everything in parallel and work with what we've got. And I think certainly EPCs aren't they're fit for current purpose, they're fit to be getting on with, but while we're sorting these things out, it's working with what we have to actually get on with stuff, I think is the...
Could I jump in here? I'm just thinking that, you know, we've got sort of this decade of action, and we have millions of homes to retrofit, that we also think about resilience at this point as well, in that we're not going to be creating homes that are net zero but that are unlivable in the summer because they're super insulated. We're not going to get the opportunity to retrofit the UK's building stock twice. So it's making sure that we've got the tension and the understanding between mitigation and adaptation and what that would mean in retrofitting individual buildings, but also neighbourhoods. And I'd say the place standard with the climate lens, it gives you a chance to think about both and to understand how they interact as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's only just creeping into the idea of cooling homes is only just creeping into government policy, which is incredible.
Yeah, and actually the peak energy demand day in the UK now is in August. It used to be in January. It used to be that heating was our biggest sort of national energy demand on the grid, and now it is actually it's cooling.
There's a question that's come in about the place standard specifically and how that can help change or update the local place plan process. So
that's what we're hoping. We're hoping that local authorities and community councils and various other kind of stakeholders use the place standard as a way of refreshing neighbourhood plans. You could use it in kind of a charrette process, but also that it's not something that's done once, box ticked, community consulted, move on, that this is something that is refreshed and done regularly.
It's a snapshot in time each time you use it. So it's imperative that you use it frequently with different members of the community at different times.
Absolutely, and keep reviewing it and coming back so then the council can pick that up.
It's a good tool just to facilitate identifying priorities and creating conversation, which has to be ongoing.
Yes,
it's that shift from consultation to participation and people actually being involved in the process.
Yes, and I remember, I think it was last year, speaking to somebody, and they said there's always been this low hum of climate anxiety ever since the past decade or so, and now it feels like it's louder. And to be able to participate in something that makes that change, I think it's really important to make sure that it's not just a consultation tick box. It is that. There's a question around when it's going to come to Scotland, and is it available in Northern Ireland?
No, so the issue is small area data is a devolved matter. So every of the 4 nations does it differently. So if I build something that works in Leeds, I can flick a switch and it works in London immediately. It's really easy. But to do, say, Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland is like doing France. It's a complete restart. Blame the politicians.
Or ask the politicians.
Ask the politicians. So yeah, no, for Scotland, we don't have a date, but I'm having conversations with various people, and it's in the works. Hopefully, it will come.
That's really good to know.
If you can respond, then it can be done.
Yeah, if someone's got a checkbook, they want to.
There's a question which I find quite interesting again for yourself, Malcolm. The place-based carbon tool shows that generally communities in dense urban areas are low emitting. So can it help us understand and distinguish better within those more rural areas, which communities have greater choice? It's about the choice and ability to decarbonize, and which may not be in that position to change behavior. So that's like, I think the next level of nuance and granularity in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've known for a long time that density is correlated with low carbon living because people tend to live in smaller homes. They're more likely to walk and cycle or use public transport than drive. So these things create low carbon lifestyles. That was one of the reasons we put in the comparison to the average of similar areas, because that includes like a rural, urban, suburban classification. So you can compare if you're in a wealthy rural neighborhood, you can see how you do compared to other wealthy rural neighborhoods. And there are plenty of places that are doing much worse than the average for rural areas. So there's progress that can be made everywhere. But yeah, certainly the decarbonisation journey is easier if you live in a city centre.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that comes through with the conversation with the community as well. So there's a question, Andy, for yourself and for Lucy. What do Andy and Lucy feel would be the most valuable climate change policy change by governments for their communities? A big question, but hopefully,
Shall I give a? So I'm involved in a project that is looking at the big word, but the governance framework. So whose job is it? And I think you've got this complete disconnection with, around responsibility. So government isn't taking responsibility. Local government can't take responsibility because it doesn't. And communities need empowerment to take responsibility. So I think mine would be to actually connect up that shared responsibility, but to give everyone the capacity and the resources that they need, so the communities can get involved and work with tools like this and work with local authorities, because local authorities have enough resource to work with communities and connect with other regions.
Yes, it's joining the dots, isn't it?
Yeah.
Finding a way, a mechanism to make sure that those dots can be joined.
Yeah.
On the south side of Glasgow, it is definitely heat. Glasgow doesn't have a policy for how to decarbonise heat in homes in Glasgow, and we need this. I mean, we don't know what it's going to be. You know, is it going to be district heating? I saw something on Twitter the other day that Glasgow City Council had done made some partnership with Denmark about district heating, and I hope, you know, we will get district heating, but it could be hydrogen. We don't know, and we don't know what that means for the tenements, these sandstone buildings that I believe will not go away. I believe they will still be standing in years to come. And how are we going to heat them? Because there's only so much people can do in their own lives, you know, and people need this change to come from the government, whether it's national government or local government. There's, you know, it's not their responsibility to be plugging the gaps and tinkering around with their meters, trying to make ends meet and trying to make pay the bills. There is a better way of heating our homes, and we need to know what it is now. We all need to be working towards it.
So system change needs to happen rather than individual.
Yeah.
The
And all
responsibility.
that stuff about doing your bit, I just think is rubbish. The system needs to change.
We've got to make it easy to do your bit and work with people.
Yeah.
Well, the system has to change, and then people just need to live their lives. You know?
Yeah.
There's no doing your bit about it at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, people will do what is easy and natural and makes things easier for them. Absolutely. There's a question here about how do we use this to monitor change over time? So, you know, there's the tools that capture data, but somebody needs to pick that up and monitor change. Who feeds into the tools with the data? So it's not something that's a one-off. It needs to be looked at. And who do you see, Malcolm, is owning this, I suppose, and taking it forward?
I think for both of the tools shown off today, they are snapshots at the moment, and there is that need to come back and do them again later on. I'd love to be able to update this tool every year. It's a time and money thing, as everything is. But yeah, it'd be nice to see it that like local authorities and communities take ownership of the issue of the data and you know, produce their own analyses and things, because they know their communities so much better. You know, I can come down from my ivory tower and produce these sort of national stuff, but the local communities, they're going to have better local data, better local insights, and so they really need to take ownership of this.
Yes, and better stories as well. We're coming back to storytelling, the impact of what this means in real life. So even with the place standard tool, then, you know, obviously Scottish government, and so there is that ownership there. But how do you see that connection being made with?
Well, yeah, it's Scottish Government, Public Health Scotland. I mean, originally the place standard tool was a kind of health and well-being sort of framework. I think really a lot of the kind of the updating of the place standard sort of work done locally, it's very much at the moment on the kind of the shoulders of the place standard champions that are in place in various different authorities. But we know from undertaking these assessments that what comes out of them is very much dependent on who's in the room and who's around the table. So it's also making sure you've got a good mix of people around the table and that you are keeping abreast of that and of kind of how these issues are evolving locally. It's a challenge, it definitely is.
Yeah, I mean, there's, in Glasgow itself, there's green space groups and environmental groups popping up all over the city through the pandemic, and there was lots before, but there's even more now. So there is people connecting to their spaces and having a renewed relationship with the outdoors, as you know. But I think if anything like that was to be introduced or to marry up, there does have to be education for everybody around storytelling and what that means, around data and what that means, and for capacity from communities, but also from Public Health Scotland or anyone who's making the tools, is their capacity to understand communities as well. There's a lot of education, storytelling, and meaningful engagement and a genuine relationship building between the people who build the tools and the people who are using them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that relates to a question that's just come in about shaping community activism, because that's where the storytelling and the data comes together. So yeah, the communication has to be strong and people need to understand the why this needs done. I suppose for me, there's a question around the big data question and privacy. You know, I know that there are many people who worry about the data sets, and even when I looked at it for the first time, I thought, oh gosh, so you know, my gas meter information is being held by somebody. So, which is, you know, of course it is, but I wonder if there's something around that which you could expand on, you know, in terms of that privacy question.
So I think there's an advantage to doing things that are at a neighbourhood level, in that, you know, none of the areas have less than about 1,000 people in them. Yeah. So you know, it's not personal data; it's averages of quite a lot of people.
Right. Yeah.
I think for most people, they just don't understand at all what's happening with their data. I mean, I suspect no one here realised that the government was collecting all your gas and electricity meter readings,
I had no idea.
but they've been doing that for a decade. It's, you know, and now we all have smart meters. You know, every 30 seconds, all of this data is being gathered. It's not so much that it's being gathered; it's what it's used for and who uses it and who has access to it, and the stories we tell from the data, and who controls those stories. And I think that the importance is that we gather data, because data allows us to have understanding, but we make that data open and accessible and allow everyone to see it and to use it, rather than to bottling it up and allowing there to be an imbalance of power, because there's an imbalance of knowledge.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. There's the power question, isn't it? Who makes the decisions? What happens to that? Is that a nervousness that you see when you're working with communities at all, or is it something that just is not part of the conversation?
It definitely crops up in conversation. I don't think, and we're yet to have the conversation about using tools like this, but I think that explanation that actually it is anonymised, quite an easy thing to get across. And I think as communities, you've got that gap between sort of macro, higher level data and what's meaningful for individuals' lives. And you've got tools that allow people to come up with their own carbon footprint, and the more engaged will do that. But I think this sort of anonymised data is where most people will be at, getting that sort of general idea of where they can make change.
Definitely for me, it's popped up from time to time. I think there's much more education needed around it, but I think in regards to, if we're talking about data as well and valuing data, it's really important to value the knowledge of the community as well, and having that as data, and to shape tools and to shape you know, things like this.
Richard, do you? I suppose I'll have to come up.
So hi, Richard Walker, ITSC. So I've got two questions. The first one's the flip side of when's the carbon calculator coming to Scotland, is when's the place standard tool Scotland coming to England? So that one's for a cat. And the second one was like to try and make the most of a hybrid event. I was going to ask if it's possible, if in real time, because I didn't realise that the speaker for the place standard tool Scotland would actually be a Yorkshire lass. So if in real time we could go and look at your hometown of Beverley on the tool and get you to kind of react in real time to the data you've seen, because I was going to suggest doing it with Andy, but he's seen it before, so but these will be genuine reactions, so it's just a thought. But you can definitely answer the first one or refuse to do the second one.
The first one, so the place standard tool as it already stands can be used anywhere. We're doing quite a lot of work with Nordic countries who are finding it useful. Really, it's just a tool for breaking down our places into themes that we can then use to talk to people and they can understand. So it might be narratives about how they move around, where they work, where they shop, whether they feel safe, whether they feel they've got a sense of belonging or control. So you can go to the place on the website, download the tool and just use it. It's not specific to kind of Scottish legislation or planning policy. In terms of the climate lens, that will hopefully be the end of March 2022, and that will just be kind of a series of additional kind of prompts and guides for facilitators. And I was actually just thinking, because I saw Beverley just on the edge of your map there, and I was just thinking, I'd love to.
Do we have a minute to?
Yeah. You've got about 5 minutes, so I'll give you a minute for your instant reaction. Brilliant.
Where's the, sorry.
Yeah, is that okay?
Talk among yourselves while I work out the technology. Oh.
There's a microphone here, so don't worry. Yeah, just come along. Yeah, come on this side. Join the panel.
I've got two challenges. It's been fascinating. I've got two challenges. One is Transport for London has its healthy streets check, 10 different factors. And some of the pushback is that councils can put some benches in, plant a tree, nice kind of unassuming things, and then not actually do the one that's more people walking, cycling, taking public transport.
Yeah.
And for climate, and we've got the climate emergency, it's how do you balance that holistic approach to streets, but also, really push on the let's cut car traffic quickly, because that's what we need to do to meet our targets. That's my first question. My second, while that's happening, is a question about this. So some local authorities, like typically city ones, most of the car traffic from residents is actually outside the boundaries. So the local plan in my council in London was saying actually traffic's not very important, because there's so little traffic in our area compared to say heating. But actually the council has a lot of levers over residents, the sorts of cars they own, whether they own a car at all, through planning policy, through parking permits policy, but that isn't captured. So does your data look at simply car traffic in that council area, or at residents, typically leisure travel that's longer distance? Thank you.
Thank you.
So I can answer the car traffic one.
Super.
So that's based, so we use the data from the MOT tests, and it's based on the location of the registered keeper. So the car mileage, I can actually show you if I put this up, you can see the average kilometers per person. Where is it? Kilometers driven per person. So that's based on the people who live in that area, how many kilometers a year they're driving their cars for all purposes.
That's great, as long as it's not a car sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've got 3 minutes, so I think it's a wonderful place to kind of end on with you trying the tool, and then I'll summarize quickly. Thank you.
Come up and you can test my knowledge of Yorkshire geography. So
Yeah.
go on, see if you can work it out.
Oh, come on, you saw me struggling with it.
I love how
Zoom
people have been
meeting
put on the
earlier.
spot today.
I was just dragging.
Yeah, so drag around might be easier.
This also shows how easy it is to use, I suppose, as a tool.
It's two places with the same town name, and then it zooms you to the wrong side of the country.
I know this is, there's only one. Oh dear. Yeah, it's going the right place. Brilliant. Yes, as I suspected. Yeah. So you can instantly see which is the affluentest end of the town, which is the northwest there. Yeah.
So total, and then transport, car emissions.
So total emissions grade, yeah. You can see myself born on the wrong side of the railway tracks, in a dark blue area there. And actually, yeah, everyone pretty much walked terraces, yeah. Click on it here. Oh, yeah, okay.
A-rated, so that's top 10% of the country.
Really?
Best performing.
Do you know why? It's neat, dense Victorian terraces, and it's walking distance to town, walking distance to the train station, excellent buses. And Yorkshire, consumable goods, spending money. No, that's absolutely fantastic. Oh.
Can you go to the poshest bit then?
Well, I got to go to Molescroft.
Very reassuring for me, because I've sat in my bedroom working from home, building all of this, and when people who actually know an area say, yes, this actually shines.
Oh wow! Look at the difference.
Yeah, so an F grade means worst 10% of the country.
Wow.
And that's just from one side of town to another.
That's a small town. It's just a town of 30,000 people. You can walk from my neighbourhood to there. You're there in 20 minutes. Yeah. Wow.
That is brilliant. Gosh. Listen, I don't know what more I can say to summarize that. I think that was just a perfect place to end on, because, again, it's made it real, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Data that you've collected has made that real. So that is absolutely fantastic. I don't know where the hour and a half has flown by. Thank you so much. I hope you've all enjoyed the session. I hope those who've joined us virtually have enjoyed a little bit of the moving around as these things always work out. Thank you so much to Decarbonate, to everyone who's been involved, bringing this together, to all the tech folk who make this happen. I wasn't quite sure how the technology would work, but it has. Huge thank you to the panel. You guys are amazing. Keep up the amazing work. So please join me in saying thank you. And have a lovely rest of COP26 and keep doing the amazing work that you all do. Thank you very much.